teacher, there's 30 young children who decide they don't want to learn. For a variety of reasons, right? Now, I became a teacher in 1953, so that's a long, long time ago. In the 1960s, I had achieved my dream in life, and that was to become a university professor, right? I have a doctorate in history, modern European history. And I experienced something teaching at this small school in Connecticut that really shocked me and made me kind of despondent. One of the things, if you're teaching European history, you teach freshman year, at least at this time, Western civilization, right? You'd have classes of 50, 75, 100, 150, right? So you face, but the problem wasn't necessarily the numbers, but the problem was that at least 60 or 70% of those freshmen coming into college didn't want to learn any more history, ever, ever. And the little thimble full of history that they knew was going to satisfy them for a lifetime. So trying to cope with this wasn't so bad when you taught majors in history, but it was present there also. I thought that the role that I would play would be kind of the entertainer, right? So I told stories, I impersonated, all sorts of things too, and it worked, right? Students really were excited and so on, but what made me despondent was that I was creating the interest, right? It wasn't there in the students. So in 1970, I left university teaching. I went to Italy with my wife Pat and our small children, 5 and a half, 7, 8, and 9, right? Our children, we went for a year to Italy and we trained to be Montessori elementary teachers. Before I tell you what impact this had on me, I wanted to say that this issue of the students who are turned off to learning, it seems to me at the bottom of the issues of motivation, right? How do you motivate students? It's also, it seems to me, at the bottom of class management and discipline. How do you then control and then be able to teach students who are not interested? And I think it's also around grades and motivation, using tests to motivate students. And I think it's also around the issues of searching for the perfect lesson plan or the perfect workbook or the perfect textbook. Can I end this? All right. When I went into this Montessori class, which was an upper elementary Montessori class from university teaching, this is what I found. There was no motivation issues. Fairly simple discipline challenges. There are no grades, no tests, no need to search for the perfect lesson plan. There is a deep respect of self, a discernible respect for others, an easy cooperation between boys and girls, younger and older, deep respect for the environment, and a universal excitement about learning. They were mostly happy, independent-minded, hardworking, intellectually challenging, young, and asked the greatest questions that I never got from those university ones. Right.
Thank you all very much for answering those first three questions. It's really fascinating to have these, I don't know how many perspectives we can, a lot of different perspectives all at once, and to see the common thread that you were talking about, Pat. So we do have some time for questions, and I definitely want to open it up so that I could spend all day here, but so are there any questions?
I'm wondering how your Montessori approach is different for secondary students, because you hear a lot about it at the elementary levels, but then what happens after that?
How does it differ? For, let's say, the adolescent?
Yeah.
It doesn't differ a lot, all right? Because if you protect the child's wonder through early years and then through the sense of the elementary, when at 12-year-old, when someone comes out of the Montessori program as an adolescent, they still have this sense of wonder, right? It's still this interest, the same kind of respect, the same kind of cooperation. But I'll tell you the secret that I learned about the adolescent was on the very first day of school, in the very first year, I was teaching a group of adolescents. I took them off on a 15-day Odyssey trip across country, a camping trip across country, and these adolescents were unbelievably wonderful. They were totally into the adventure of learning. We were going from Minneapolis to the Blue Ridge Mountains, to Monticello, Jefferson's home. We were going to Jamestown. We were going to Williamsburg, Washington's home in Mount Vernon, and Washington, D.C. So there was an overall kind of project. And there was the most interesting and adolescent conscious rules governing this. So they were respectful, interested, cooperative, not loud, not noisy, not rude. And when they came back from this trip, there was like 2 months of intense sort of spillover of the trip. And they weren't learning just, let's say, Williamsburg or history. They were learning also geography along the way. They were involved in math all the time. They were involved in science and so on. So, and art and whatnot. This was a total learning adventure. Turned them on. I talked about this. But does that sort of answer your question?
The actual seminal work that Montessori wrote on for adolescents featured putting them on the land on a farm. And our school owns a 160-acre farm in Wisconsin. Yeah, and the kids, they're going, currently they go out on 6-week, I forget what we call them, the periods of time where a group of about 14 will go and live on them. And then it's a CSA, community supported agricultural project, so they have to plant and harvest and do all. And so that goes after the whole process, but they are consciously community building through real work.
That's interesting because that's certainly true for us at Watershed, and I put under the one that you're doing that Minnesota one as well, with an agricultural-based connection in Wisconsin with community-based agriculture.
Yeah.
Probably the same Philadelphia farms or the same farms.
Yeah. Interesting.
I always wonder how Waldorf education is different than Charlotte's.
It's a really good question, and I was resonating with this idea of what you said about when you have this kind of belief system around an educational model, you get in fights.
Yeah.
and there's a big question in Waldorf education because of this original picture of the school being independent, not controlled by government, but really driven by the teachers in the classroom. And the problem with that is that in the world we live in at this point, for the most part, that in order to be that independent, you're a private school. And then there's the other condition, that it be open to everybody, and private schools, well, quite simply are not. They're open to the children whose families can afford them. And so we have this big debate in the Waldorf education movement right now of how do we reconcile those two things? Because the Association of Waldorf Schools of North America, which is our accreditation association, and which owns the patent rights to the names Waldorf and Steiner, really controls what schools are able to use those terms and what schools don't. And do you live up to what was set out as